A very warm welcome to everybody watching now our conversation, and I really welcome you from the bottom of my heart, Laura Kaestele, to the Conscious Evolution Summit. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you.
And in the beginning, I want to read a brief introduction about you, Laura. So Laura is a designer, facilitator, project collaborator, possibility manager, and action learner with a deep care for the living earth and passion for evolutionary development, working for ecological and social regeneration. She has a bachelor in integrative eco-social design and is enrolled in a master program at Gaia University, where she's also mentor for students. Furthermore, Laura is a board member of the Global Eco-Village Network and active practitioner of permaculture, also a member of the Circle-Wise Network and the Social System Mapping Community of Practice. So Laura, and as I used to do it almost with every speaker in this year's summit, I would love to hear a bit a personal story from you so that our audience can really connect with you deeply and move into your universe, so to speak. So in this case, I would like to invite you to share maybe one or two experiences or circumstances in your life which contributed to the work you are doing now and the engagement you have now in the world.
Mm-hmm. I think one part is just a very long standing love for nature and all living beings and life itself, which I have since I'm a very young child, you know, and I have memories of being just in awe of looking at natural spaces and natural beauty, or connecting with plants or animals, and how that was always very fascinating and nourishing. And I could spend like easily hours just, you know, being there and playing. And I think that love for life is still very much alive. And I know that from, you know, very young. And maybe as another example, like 10 years ago, when I moved to live in a small intentional community, I think this gave me an experience or a sense of the bigger potential behind groups, and how human collectives can be so much more than the sum of their parts. And I think that it didn't always work out, but it gave me enough of a glimpse of a potential that I got super curious and really started to research and engage more with social systems. So I think I could share maybe those two as examples that still carry forward and inspire my work today.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I know that you visited many countries in the last years and spent many days and weeks and months engaging in different community activities, and you are studying in Gaia University, which is really a very practical way of studying different subjects. Mm-hmm. And I just wonder, what has the most interest right now?
For sure, like still ecological and social systems, because in the end they're both living systems, whether it's human beings or plants, or, you know, like water or the climate, that, you know, all come together in ecosystems. But I think I'm still very much inspired by living systems, both on an ecological and social perspective, and bringing bringing aliveness and nurturing aliveness in those systems in my work, but also in my personal life. You know, I really appreciate nurturing vitality and aliveness in my daily life, in my habits, in my exercise, in my conversations, in my nutrition. So I think that is very alive.
Mhm. And what in which specific way do you see kind of a strong potential to, I mean, we are really in a huge crisis, and in the same time in a big opportunity as humanity. And what do you sense? What is very important for us as a next step, as really evolving as human beings, and also on a collective level? What do you sense there is needed for us to really move with the evolutionary impulse?
I don't know if there's any one easy answer to such a complex question. And I think that's what, for me, one of the beautiful things, that, you know, evolution happens in many small, intricate, complex ways. It's not necessarily, you know, comprehensible in one single thing. But I do feel a movement towards, you know, becoming more of a human collective, becoming more holistic, nurturing life, regenerating, healing, caring. All of these things are for sure part of this wave that we're moving in together.
And you mentioned in a conversation before that your deep interest goes more and more into networks and learning about networking and supporting networks. I mean, you are part of different networks. And what would you like to bring to our awareness when we think of networks? So maybe first of all, what is the difference between an organization and a network in your perspective?
Actually, I can share some of the materials that I prepared, which will also cover this question.
Great.
I think that's the easiest way to do it. Let me just share my screen with you all. Yeah, you can see it now, right?
Perfect.
Okay. So for this conversation, I really want to share some of the highlights around networks and how networks are emerging as part of this next evolutionary phase. And to start with, I want to just bring to our awareness again some of the transformative or evolutionary trends that are and have been happening in these last years, which I kind of put into four, you know, simplified categories. One thing that we're observing, you know, the past few decades is a huge technological development, right? Like how quickly there are new apps and new applications and software and smartphones and more data on smaller devices and more devices that can do, you know, amazing things. The past few decades have really been an explosion in technological innovation, including also the internet and the entire online space that was created, you know, which started very small, but is now a space where people spend many, many hours, especially now with COVID. Now, so many people, many hours every day in an entire online universe with so many websites and offerings and courses and ways to interact, and many you know, networks, social networks, platforms to connect with other people. There is also a large social movement that is happening, you know, from the 70s, 80s, but also more recently. There's a massive outpouring of initiatives and projects and foundation and groups and meetings and gatherings, and, you know, like a huge social movement of people that are, you know, taking action and connecting around topics that they care about and find important, you know. And this also moves towards more community, network, collective-based work, as we realize that a lot of these issues are much too big to tackle as an individual. Doesn't mean that individual action and behavior isn't important. It just means that it's not enough. And this is the third circle that I drew here, that the planet and the planetary challenges that we're facing are so huge. They're also calling us and pushing us as a necessity towards more collaborative, collective behavior and thinking, as they're becoming too big to be dealt with by any one person, any one company, any one nation on this planet. And lastly, and there are many more speakers that go into much more depth around that, is a circle that I called mind or consciousness, you know, and also the evolutionary trends happening there, you know, towards more mindfulness, presence, awareness, interconnectedness, interbeing, and these kind of trends. And all together, those four things, they all point towards networks, or networks is one of the things that really emerges in the connection of these four, you know, evolutionary trends and fields and the things that are happening on the planet right now. So just as a little bit of context, why I see this is so relevant, and some of the observations that I would say like give a sense of why there's so many more networks existing and working these days, why it's becoming so much more of a way to collaborate and to be together as people. And and evolution is not so much about growth or reform or revolution, you know, like people rising up and taking away power. It's much more about an ongoing, emerging, deeper change that comes through in living systems, that's ever present. And and some of the shifts that we're all observing is a shift, you know, from more hierarchy towards more peer-based collaboration and co-creation. We're also experiencing a shift from pressure to be the same and to conform to social norms, to a much larger appreciation of differences and how these differences really lead to breakthroughs and innovation. We're also seeing a shift, you know, away from more control to a web that is supportive of co-creation and of being together, that enables much more than it controls. Another shift from, you know, extracting resources and accumulating financial capital towards, you know, caring and nurturing resources and having a regenerative flow of in our economy, a much more thriving circular system. Or also from a more individual, separate, maybe purely rational way of being to a much more relational, interconnected, holistic way of being human. So again, a lot of these things are changes that are happening and becoming stronger. And networks are one of the places where we can really see this play out. And as a response to your question that you started, and that where I thought it would be good to just share this slide, which gives a little, again, a bit simplified, but basic comparison between organizations and networks. So organizations work really well for, like, you know, like a single organization, a small group that has specific plans and action and timelines, often a hierarchical structure, or at the very least, like very clear roles and accountabilities, even if it's more flat, right? And it's a lot about making plans and then tracking the progress, moving towards outcome. And that's what could consider success, if you achieve the outcomes that you planned, right? And the role of leaders is often to designate jobs and roles, hold people accountable, support them, and encourage them, you know, to do their work. And scaling happens through replicating programs, like rolling them out in more countries and more places and expanding them. And a lot of the information flow is a broadcasting of media to inform a large audience. And in networks, we see quite different patterns. It's much more focused and suitable for partnerships and cross collaboration. It's focused on arising opportunities and creative solutions. It's more peer-based, and there's peer accountability. There's no boss, there's nobody with an higher authority in a network. And action can be started by anyone at any time within the network. And success is not so much achieving certain outcomes. Success, or what networks strive towards, is catalyzing a lot of learning and deep reflection that then leads to breakthroughs, which requires a lot of small experiments and adaptation and improvisation. And leaders in networks are there to catalyze action, to support stronger connections, to lead the reflections, and to facilitate the network coming together. And scaling happens through networking and sharing and learning, like spreading things. That's how you scale in a network. It's not replicating the same thing. And they often use communication platforms on social media, forums, discussions, feedbacks, and so on. So that gives a little bit of a sense. And one very brief way to maybe remember how is a network mindset different is to understand that two of the core pillars are connection and action. So connection is really focused on building trusting relationships, which is a very essential piece of networks. It's also critical in organizations, but not maybe quite as much. You can get along further without it in an organization. You really fall very, very easily if you don't have that in a network. And it's also really focused on action and having collaborative, shared projects amongst members that also make the network alive. So it shifts to connect and collaborate instead of controlling. And just to be very clear, what do I mean when I speak about networks? So networks are webs of relationship and the social patterns that they create. So that means a network can be comprised of individual people. It can also be comprised of organization, or both. It can be groups, teams of people, organizations, but they come together in a larger social system and form a network. And these patterns, they have a strong influence on the communication, on the collaboration, and also on the likelihood of innovation that can happen in a network. And they're a lot focused, as I said, like on trust and relationship and support, and on creating an enabling environment to get activity going and create a greater synergy. That's some of the potential of networks. So they're really effective to improve information flow, to have more communication and an awareness of the relationship, to have access and open up new resources, to expand leadership from one person to many, to encourage collaboration, innovation, and learning across the network, to have a larger sense of inclusion and the capacity to bridge divides. Often it can result in better outcomes because there's more collective capacity, and they facilitate scale and impact throughout the network. So the network approach might not be the perfect option always, but it's particularly useful when the challenge that you're tackling is too big for one organization, even a very competent one, to handle. When you need new ideas and innovation, when you don't really know what you're actually needing to do, when the solution is not clear, when you're trying to really build like a new system, and when you need to engage people from very different backgrounds, maybe different organizations, different countries, then a networking approach can be particularly useful. And just to have a little bit of a framing on networks, and maybe at this point, if you're listening, just take a moment reflect on your life and think about the networks that you're a part of. And I'm pretty sure every one of us can think at least of one network that they're a part of, and probably very likely several one of those. So I'll just give you a few seconds. Think about a network you're a part of. Because they're very different kinds of network, you know, like one network, which we can call an ego network, and not so much ego in the psychological, spiritual sense of the word, but just in the sense that it's focused and it revolves around one core person and is defined by the direct relationship to that one person. And an example for that can be in the career environment or in politics, right? You can have one central person and they have a network around them through direct relationships. Could be also focused around caregiving. Like if you're a single mom and you're raising 2 or 3 kids and you have a network around you that supports you, you know, to manage your work, to manage the care for the children and all of these things. That's an ego network, because the other people don't know each other. They just come together through you as the central point. So this network is really organized around that, and there might be a like exchange, but it's through that central person.
So Laura, just a question. So kind of often what is called often, this is my community, or this is the community around me, would that kind of fall into that category in a way?
Could be, it depends. Maybe it becomes a bit more clear when I outline the other 3, because that shows the difference quite clearly. So the next kind of, you know, larger one is called socio network. So this is like a network, but it has a very clear boundary. It's like a network in a box. So the mission is very clear. There's also a certain sense of centralization, but it's more people within very solid social boundaries. So this is, for example, like a school or a university or a company, right? Like if you're not employed there, if you're not working there, you're not part of the company. So it is a network, but it has a very clear boundary, is a socio network. And it looks in only at the relationships within that, not beyond. So I think some, like also like a rural village could be a socio network, you know, where like there are certain people that live in the village and they know each other and they support each other with certain things, and they share that, you know, like living in this space and the relationship, and that's it. Like it's very, like it's clearly defined. That's also a socio network. And then networks that most of us, I'm sure, are part of, these are open networks that have no boundaries, that don't have any shared intention or, you know, coherent system. The internet is such an example. You know, anybody can do anything. It's very open. It doesn't have anything shared. Other examples are also Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. You know, anybody can create an account, can focus on any topic, any project, any community, any group, and be connected to anybody, and there's no limit who's included in an open network. Anybody can join. You don't need to have anything in common with all of the other people, but because there's so many part of it, you probably do with a few of them. And the 4th type is an eco network, and it nests a little bit between a socio and an open network, in the sense that it's a network of people and organizations. They do have an alignment around a common purpose. They usually have quite complex reciprocal flows of resources, like giving and receiving in different directions. And the boundaries are like permeable. So there is a sense of who's a part of it and who's not. Like it's not completely open. It's not all the way an open network, but it's not quite as fixed and rigid as a socio network. So there is a coming and going, you know, there is some opportunities of people that are maybe more on an edge and people that are more central. So it's a bit in between in that sense. And it really thrives from the diversity, from the self-organizing and the network weaving that can happen. So it's kind of, you know, the term is inspired by ecosystems also, right? So these are like 4 different typologies around networks that give us a bit of a basic understanding. And I mean, networks over time can, of course, also evolve from one to the other. And I'm sure, as I said, like all or most of us are in different capacity part of such kind of networks. And another way to hone in on why networks, like what makes them special, are to look at some of the qualities. You know, networks tend to be very diverse, intentionally inclusive, peer-based, trusting, self-organized, leaderful, meaning they really encourage leadership. It's not like one position that people compete. It's something that is encouraged in a larger group of people. They're decentralized. They focus a lot on experimenting and learning and sharing. They're naturally expansive. They're transformational. They usually have a shared purpose, and they give a lot of space for creative expression, for collaboration, and to be adaptive and changing over time. So in a way, you know, an organization, again, is also a more structured form of a social system. And within looking at networks, there are also different emphases or aspects that certain networks have, which can be categorized in 4 different fields. Some networks also have a combination of 2, 3, or all of them. But one focus of networks is to be focused on intention, is a group that's specifically connected around an explicit issue or purpose. And they really try to engage people around this specific mission and the strategies and the goals. For example, like a political campaign could be that. Not like they have a mission to, like, you know, stop something or do something in a certain place, and they're focused on that, and that's the one thing they connect about towards moving towards that goal. So the intention is really what draws people together and working on a very explicit issue. Right, so a lot of the topics now that are, you know, coming up much more strongly also around racism and whiteness and blackness, that's a lot around intentional networks that are focused on this issue, right? Trying to bring a difference in the social justice and how we interact. There are also networks that really strongly focus on relationships and the social connections between people. And it's really, you know, they're trying to have high quality relationships and building trust and integrating people well in the network. So that's another focus that networks sometimes have. Or some are really focused on action. And their main thing is to use the network to have more collaborative action and self-organized projects happening. And that's why people are inspired to join, because they want to do something together with other people. And it really encourages people to take initiative, and it usually helps people, you know, to find like-minded ones with shared interests so they can join in the same project and then collaborate. Or you can have networks that are really focused on support, to have a support function, to set up communication systems, structures, resources, evaluation, support. For example, probably you could say the AA groups, you know, for alcoholics, they're really focused on support. Like, you have that as a support network. That's the main reason why people join. They're like, I'm an alcoholic and I need support, right? And then that's what the network provides, like the groups and the buddy systems and the structures and the regular meetings and all of these to deliver the support that people are looking for. So again, you could have multiple examples for these, and many times, you know, the intention, relationship, action, and support also come together in some way or form. But this, again, it helps us to develop more of a network mindset if we understand some of the core essence, or also the needs behind networks, or what needs networks are fulfilling. And networks, obviously, what I pointed out, they develop over time. And many times networks start with what you can see here on the far left as scattered clusters. Again, these clusters could be people, they could be organizations, they might have some shared interest or a work area, but they don't really know of each other. They're located somewhere, they're working on their own, you know, they're doing their thing, they don't really know. And this is where most networking efforts start. And then someone takes some initiative and starts forming relationships and connecting. And then you get like the first phase of a hub and spoke network, where you have more of a central position. Again, could be a person, could be an organization, an institute, whatever. And they're reaching out and connecting and going like, you know, like you're working on this and you're also working on this and you have this shared interest. So they're reaching out. And then when it continues and more connections and cross collaboration starts happening, it moves into a phase of being a self-organizing network. And you can see on the image, there's a lot more connections between things. It's not as centralized anymore. And it's way more interaction flowing and information flowing than when it was just scattered clusters. Like people know from each other, or they heard about someone and they're working with this one. And slowly the network evolves more. And the kind of last stage that's outlined here is a system shifting network. So this is, you know, like even more connection, more collaboration, more innovation, more breakthroughs that are happening everywhere. So the system becomes so potent that it can shift whole systems that they're working in. So let's say you have, yeah, like let's say you have,
for that?
let's say you have a network that's focused on food systems, you know, and really shifting, like, how are we farming? How are we treating the soil? What are we growing? You know, the consumers, like, how are they getting the food policies, like the political level. So they're really working, and they're working with farmers and consumers and organizations and agricultural agents and, you know, all of these different, and if there's more of that happening at some point, it can really change the food system, you know, in a certain area where they're focusing their work. Because they're becoming so present, and they're sharing like all of the best practices and the collaboration and the resources and the information. So the farmer here can learn from what the farmer here did, and, you know, the consumers here inspire there, and all of that. So it can really have a systemic impact, truly, over time. And this is, again, you know, depending on the network, it can take several years or decades to evolve and grow in that way, you know.
Do you have an example of an existing network in this area?
I don't know about a system shifting network. It's also, it's not necessarily a hard line, like when do you cross from one phase to the other? So I think it's just a good question. Maybe we can all think about this. Like, do we know in where we live, where we work, do we know a network that's really at that maximum, you know, capacity and maturity where it's changing systems?
Yeah, I like that invitation. At the end of the video, there's really also this possibility to leave a comment, and I would love to hear from you when you know about such a impactful, already existing system. Doesn't need to be necessarily about what Laura mentioned about food and farmers. Could also be in a very different area, maybe health or education or media or whatever. But I would love to hear and read from you what you know.
Yes, let's see what comes out of this collective intelligence. A lot of the networks I'm engaged in and I work with, I would say, are either transitioning from hub and spoke towards self-organizing, fully in self-organizing, or maybe trying to grow beyond self-organizing. I would say that's the majority of the network. So some were centered around the self-organizing, either in one of the directions. That's the majority of the networks that I've been working with over the past few years. They're like in that phase of their development. And as I said, like, it takes time, no? It's like a maturing process to really come to that stage. And networks is not such a, you know, like it's a new-ish form of organizing. So a lot of networks are maybe 10 years old, 20 years old, 30, 40, 50, but not much longer. Yeah, let's continue, but it's a good question. Maybe you know some. And one thing that I've worked with, Puria introduced me that I'm a designer. So I like to design things, which is just another word of being very intentional and creative about what I do and how I do it. And one of the frameworks that has been really useful in designing with networks are to pay attention to those 7 elements, which in some way or form can be found in all networks. The first one is purpose. Like, what is the network's reason for being? And how implicit or explicit is that? But is usually alive somehow. The second one is membership. Who is a member? How do you become a member? What does it mean? What does it require? How many members do you have or want to have? These are all good questions to consider. And those elements are relevant both for newly starting networks to consider as they're starting and setting themselves up, but they're also an interesting framework for evaluation for already existing networks. So you can also consider those and just check, like how fulfilled are we in all of those 7 areas? Like what is going really well? Where do we maybe have some gaps or challenges? So the third one is around the value proposition, which means like, what is the benefit that people get individually, collectively from the network? What does the network provide? What value? The fourth one is resources. What is the network's funding model? Like, how are resources generated? And that is financial resources, but that's also intellectual resources, social capital, connections, time, skills, all of these things. How are we handling our resources? Because all networks need to be resourced. The fifth part is around operating principles and cultures. Like, what are the guidelines for how we interact, how we communicate in the network? The sixth element is coordination, facilitation, and communication. So how do network members connect, communicate, work with each other? What kind of platforms, practices are we using? And the last one is governance. So this is focused on decision making. Who decides what, how in the network? So all those elements, as I said, can be helpful to set up new systems and new networks and design them, or to evaluate and improve and expand within existing networks. And one thing that is also part of designing and developing networks is mapping them. So what you can see here with the different dots and lines is just an example of how a network can look like if you visualize it. And it can illuminate some opportunities for more connections, for action, for investment. So the first stage is always knowing your network, to really see like, how is the network? Who is in it? What's happening? And the second stage, once you have that, is to, we call it knit the net, to adjust the network for improvements, for accessing potential. And some of that can really become visible through the mapping process, because networks are too big and too complex to fit on an organizational chart or to fit into any one person's mind. So we use maps as a tool in this process. And this is also a piece of work that I've done with CircleWise, one of the networks that I've been involved in for a few years. And I'm just gonna show you a few examples of a social systems map that I've created with in collaboration with the network using a software called Kumu, and inviting all of the members to become part of it, and gathering the information from the network members themselves. So it's really self-fed with the information. So this is one of the overviews that we have, where we can see the people and then the organizations or groups that they're a part of as the green symbols. And I'm not going to go into more detail, but just to give you a bit of a visual impression how a network map can look like. And a great thing with this application Kumu is that you can create different views to highlight and pull out different patterns and information within one map, and the information that's collected in the database behind the visual map. So another view is to look at the relationships. So this is how this network looks when you look at the relationships. And at this stage, when I took the screenshot, it had about 120 members that have already signed up to be part of the map, and over 1,700 connections between them. And you can see some of the patterns of the connections, and how there's like a center where there's like a high density of connections, and how there's edges where there's fewer connections. And in eco networks, both of those are very relevant, because you need the center and the core that, you know, is more engaged, more active, more connected, is maybe investing more time every day, every week to work. You need that to really move forward and create things, but you also need all of the network edges to bring in innovation, to cross-pollinate, to bring diversity in of a very different perspective, inspiration. So there's really no judgment in that. It's really just mapping what is and valuing and making space for all those different aspects to play out fully in their niche as part of the system. So this is another way that you can view some of the patterns. Another way here, and you can see almost these like spiraling patterns that are forming. And this is where we clustered people around shared interests and working areas that they're having. So the red circles, and then you see who is connected to which one of the fields. And it shows, again, a little bit of a different pattern in the whole network. Or also, which is a very common feature, is you can have a geographical map, and you can see where are people based in their home places and their workplaces, and get a sense of the location and the geographical dimensions of your network, or the gaps thereof. And with this network, we're also going to use this as a potential to support more local initiatives from forming between people that live more closely together. So yeah, just as a few examples of network mapping. And one more aspect that I want to bring in, because I've mentioned it quite a bit in the beginning, is around leadership in networks. Because this is one of the things that is very different compared to a lot of organizations and a lot of companies, how they're structured, right? We said in networks, it's completely beneficial to have many leaders. In fact, it's impossible to lead a network as one person, despite an ego network. Let's be clear, that is very centralized around one person. But otherwise, network leaders, or rather network weavers, are people who are aware of and take responsibility for helping the network to develop intentionally, to become more effective, healthy, productive, innovative. So some of the things that network weavers might do is support people to identify shared interests or challenges or opportunities, be aware and strengthen relationships and also the quality of relationship, to bring in new voices and to encourage the diversity, you know, like feeding in from the edges. That's a leadership skill. You know, that's a very different way of thinking about it. They're also there to strategically connect people from different areas for mutual benefits, for exchange, to support experimentation, to generate ideas, also to facilitate reflection, to really notice what works, what doesn't work, what can we learn here together, and then to share that learning across the network. And to use different ways of communication, like gatherings or social media, to engage more people, to serve as catalysts for more self-organization, to support creativity, collective wisdom, and to also mentor and coach other people in how they can become leaders in the network and step up. So in a way, if you're a leader in a network, you're also a leader maker. and you benefit from having more leaders around you instead of having competition with other leaders, because there's not enough space. In a network, there's infinite space for more people and for more leaders. And related to the 4 aspects of networks, we can also look at 4 different core roles of network weavers. One is really focused on the relations and connecting people and getting the network started, like to building all those different connections and creating the social culture. So these are connectors. There are also people that are really focused on the action part and that support self-organization and collaboration in projects. People can also be really engaged as facilitators to set up conversations, to convene, to focus the network, to come together. Or people can be guardians of the network. So they support the systems of the network, the communication systems, the training systems, the support systems, all these spaces, and taking leadership in that area. So one of the last pieces I want to end with, because for me this is a very practical piece of that can help if you're part of a network, if you're interested in growing to be a network leader, to be more intentionally and more responsible about developing the network that you're a part of. These are some interesting things to consider. One is the communication system. Do you have good spaces, processes, and protocols for communication, for interaction, for self-organization to really happen? Are these working really well? Are these accessible? Or is there room for further development? Another thing that can be amazing, we talked about networks need resources. So setting up something like an innovation or an activation fund that can give resources to self-organized collaborative projects at different points in the network can be amazing, because it really gives energy to make those initiatives really flow. Also having communities of practice for learning, where people from different parts of the networks, from different projects can come together to explore, to support, and to share learnings. This is part of the scaling of networks. If the learning can travel across the network, it scales. Also to be a catalyst in the network, meaning that you support people to learn network thinking and behaviors. This also includes dismantling racism, learning self-organization, supporting experimentation and collaboration in projects. So this really amplifies the speed and the depth of the transformation that can happen within a network. Also having systems to track and to capture the learning and the outcomes that people create, so it can be spread in a network. And lastly, looking at governance, like, do you have clear ways of making decisions? And I'm not suggesting networks should make everybody decisions together. Rather, most networks choose ways to have also decision-making decentralized. There might be a co-creative process, an advice process where you just elicit feedback. Some people use systemic consensus or consent process where they measure for resistance, or some other kind of participatory decision-making process that's decentralized, but that also empowers people at different parts to make decisions and to take action. So they don't feel held back by the network, but they really feel supported by the network. And I wanted to put that because it was quite complex. These last pieces, I put it back again into a little graphic, into a little flower. And you can see, the purpose as a central piece, the communication, the mapping, which I showed you several examples, and then also resources in networks. And then the different elements that also are on the flower petals between those. So for example, governance is making decisions how resources are used to achieve the purpose. Or learning focuses really on having exchange about the shared purpose that you have. This is where you learn, right? Or mapping, so together with communication, can really support the relationships, because you see who's connected to who, and you have a platform to be in touch and to meet new people. And projects are a way where also people that have identified maybe shared interests in the mapping process together with the resources can really go into the project work together. So that's just as a little visual representation of these elements. And those to me are very practical areas of activity and action and of design that can be applied in pretty much any network. They might need to be adapted and contextualized, but so far in my work, I've found all of them relevant in the networks that I'm engaging with. So that's one of the things that I actively work with when I work with networks. So I wanted to share that with you as a way to inspire and encourage you to be very active and responsible and intentional member or leader in the networks that you're a part of. And hopefully some of the things I shared can be an inspiration for that and really give you a possibility of how to activate the potential in networks, because these are one of the things that I see massive potential for the future and really a core thing of how we're evolving as humanity. So shifting our mindset and leadership towards network weaving, to use network mapping as a tool to know, analyze, and weave the network to become stronger, to really focus on relationships and connecting and listening and engaging diverse people with different perspectives, to develop the support systems and structures that serve the network, to have trainings and for leadership and for certain skills in the network, to encourage self-organization and collaborative projects, to find creative ways to catalyze resources and funds that can really be invested in projects and in network building, and to have the communication and learning platforms so information and knowledge can really spread freely within the network. So some of my last points. And here I'm just gonna briefly mention two of the key groups of people, and they also have websites that I've been learning a lot from around networks, are June Holly's website, Network Weavers, and also Christine and Tim's website of Greater Than the Sum. There are also several fascinating books on the topic, including the Network Weaver Handbook, Network, or Connecting to Change the World, as well as several others, and articles on a topic. So if anyone feels inspired by this conversation, there are many resources you can tap into to learn more and engage with networks. Yeah, that was the piece I wanted to share.
Thank you. And maybe can you just stop sharing this so that we come together? Wow, wonderful. It's so inspiring. And what I noticed is that it's really pulling my mind into expansion. Just listening to you and tuning into this issue of networking makes such a movement. And what I also sense is that this is the future in a way. And what I really loved was the term leader maker. Yeah. And I mean, if people are interested to work with you together or have further questions or are interested to have kind of a mapping in their network, how could people reach you the best? How could they contact you?
Yeah, I think I can share my email contact. That's a good way to get in touch with questions or inquiries.
All right.
And also checking out the websites and resources can be a good way just to deepen your understanding, to really see where you're at and what kind of support would be helpful for your networking efforts.
And maybe just as a last piece of this beautiful, inspiring and informing conversation, where are you personally at? What what is now mainly present in you and inspiring your passion with this topic of networking?
I think one piece that's really fascinating to me is a little bit more under the surface of a lot of the active network weaving work that one can be doing, and it's focused a lot around sense making, you know, like seeing patterns and making sense of them, looking at a network or the people or projects and asking, now what? You know, like what's next, what's the potential, how can we, you know, like evolve that. So this, yeah, it's like sense making about like within the network for individuals, like how do I make sense of this, what is the benefit, the use, the value for me, but also for the network as a collective. How are we making sense of this? How are we using this, connecting? How are we expressing our full potential? And then growing also towards this larger, like what is our role in the larger system, in the world? How are we making sense of the challenges and opportunities that are there in the larger field? So this to me is a very interesting piece these days. And secondly, also really more of the subtle dynamics of shifting towards our network mindsets, which is also, this is not one shift that happens in a moment, it's another evolutionary process, a moving into a network mindset. And this is something that I feel it happens as you engage, as you do, as you immerse yourself in networks. And I found, for example, some of the things that we learned and that shaped our minds being part of social networks like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram is really unhealthy networking. And being more part of intentionally designing and engaging in network is also an opportunity to unlearn some of those things. Let me give an example. In social media, is very common to browse through, you know, your Facebook friends and the posts, or the YouTube or whatever, Twitter, all of these things, and compare yourself. Be like, oh, they look so beautiful. Oh, wow, they're on a vacation. They, you know, they made a business achievement. And it really is an environment that lends itself to comparison and judgment. And, you know, posting the best pieces of your life and comparing it to other people. And in the networks that I'm engaging in, we're really trying to shift the mindset of people away from that, and to really see that the things that they're giving and gifting and contributing to the network, just beautiful in and of themselves, without any comparison, without any judgment, for one. And for two, that if somebody else has a skill that you don't have, that's not a bad thing. That's not, oh, I'm lacking something. That's like amazing, because we're part of the network. I'm enriched by you having that skill, you know, like it's a benefit for me if people are really skillful, because the network makes it as accessible for us as a collective. You know, I can really celebrate other people's contributions and achievement and skills, because it's not separate, it's part of our collective. So together it becomes more potent, more beautiful, more productive, right? So it's a very different mindset. Or what I shared about leadership, it's a different mindset in how you engage in networks. Or also around, many times we're very used to being able to, you know, like mentally understand, control, process things step by step. You know, you make a plan, something happens first, then something after, something next. You know, I'm part of a group, we report to this one boss, or, you know, we send our applications here and we have the deadline there. In a network, and already like mapping your network is so much more emergent and complex and chaotic, that, you know, C happens after A, and then, you know, like it happens in a very different order, and then you do something, and then you continue, and then you go back to step one, and you change things again, and you adapt, and you emerge, you know, things step by step in a very iterative, cyclical process. And it's usually much too complex and chaotic to really hold and process. So if you try that, usually you can sense in yourself, but maybe also in the interactions, becomes more forceful. It becomes more tension. And if you let that go, and you're like, okay, this is more complex than anyone can really process, this is a bit more chaotic, then the network can just live and breathe in and of itself. And this is sometimes what I also find, you know, working with clients, working with networks, that I need to facilitate that process for them, because they might have moments where they really freak out, and they're like, you know, like, somebody said this is not good, like, we need to change everything, or this is too much, or this is not happening enough. And so part of the work I found, you know, working in networks, is also to really facilitate that process and that change in mindset, which is something that evolves and that you can cultivate step by step. So I think these are some of the things that I find quite fascinating, beyond an introduction and a framework for thinking and engaging in networks more intentionally.
I'm really happy that you mentioned that, and the image which I received while I was listening to that part was really looking into a sky with millions of stars, and this idea to know all of that and to be in control all of that is just not possible. But how exciting it is to be part of all of that, and to be moving in all of that, and to witness, and to be nourished, and to nurture, and to have exchange, and to grow, and to know things, and to don't know things, and to explore things. So definitely you have inspired me, Laura, with what you have shared. And I'm curious to hear from you in the audience what you took out of this presentation and out of this invitations to expand and to expand and shift into another mindset. And yeah, you have this chance at the end of this video to leave a comment. You can also join our Facebook group, so Conscious Evolution Summit, and share something there. And Laura, I really want to thank you that you made space in your really full schedule, I know, with your master's study and all of your engagement in different networks. I don't take it for granted. And I really appreciate the work you are sharing. And it's really a great joy to have you again in the Conscious Evolution Summit. Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure. I'm sure as we're evolving in our consciousness, we'll be more engaging in networks. So this is a really good investment in our future, individually and collectively, to become really skilled and intentional within networks. I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more of those around in the next few decades.
Thank you. And thank you for you watching our conversation. And please help us to spread that. So if you find that really meaningful and useful, and you want to contribute to its outreach, it's still time to tell about the summit to your friends and invite them to join us. And I hope to see you in our next conversation.